Here's three price scenarios that I'm looking at when it comes to H-bar in an event where maybe, let's say, there is a fully fledged type of hypothetical altcoin season during the cycle, but even though nothing I say is financial advice, the first scenario I want to take a look at is maybe the idea of $2.50, a 10x from here, and market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be nearly $106 billion. Now, this may seem like kind of a very outlandish market cap, according to some people, but to me, it doesn't seem like maybe that unrealistic, especially when I've seen BNB reach over $100 billion in market cap, and even we saw that back in 2021, so it doesn't seem that kind of ridiculous to me. But even besides that, I'm also a fan of the fundamentals of Hedera, and let me explain why. When it comes to Hedera, sometimes you like to say, oh, it's kind of boring, but I disagree with that, in my perspective, because while a lot of other projects out there use traditional blockchain technology, Hedera Hashgraph actually uses something called a directed acyclic graph, which arguably there are some, maybe benefits when compared to traditional blockchain technology, like for instance, supposedly improved data storage, also supposedly amazing scalability, and also we take a look at, for instance, right, just as an example, per transaction average, Hedera supposedly consumes less energy than something like Solana. We take a look at Ethereum, like Avalanche. So I find that very impressive. So again, there's kind of that energy efficient sort of vibe going on there. Now I get it. Sometimes people like to say, oh, but people aren't going to change to this because they say that traditional blockchain technology is already so, kind of established, right? It already kind of has a lot of projects using that, and then it's already kind of up and running, so to speak. I'm totally aware of that, but when it comes to an enterprise, right, I'm just assuming that something that massive is going to care about these sort of small details in terms of like the small improvements that it may have, right, over, let's say, a project that may use traditional blockchain technology. So maybe in the retail side of things, I think it may not necessarily make such a big difference, but when it comes to an enterprise where efficiency, I would arguably say, does matter a lot, this could be something that I think could have that edge in that sense. However, we also have to take a look at Hedera's governing council. Supposedly, we've seen something like Google, right? Not to mention, we take a look at something like Mondelez, which their brands do include something like Oreo, Cliff, right? Like the Cliff Bar. And that, again, is also in the Hedera governing council. I mean, there's a lot, but I'm just naming a few there. But I think when it comes to Hedera, man, I like its governing council. I like the fundamentals that it has. I like the exchange listings when it comes to H-bar. I mean, this is kind of like something that I do want to take a look at. Now, I'm not telling you to do anything when it comes to H-bar, but this is just my perspective, and maybe the idea of $2.50 wouldn't necessarily surprise me if, let's say, maybe it did happen during a fully fledged type of altcoin season. Now, the next scenario I want to take a look at is $2.75, an 11x from here. Now, considering current circulating supply, market cap would be, again at that point, around $116.5 billion. Now, again, it's not something that necessarily I think kind of would surprise me too much, because we saw XRP not too long ago reach a market cap of around $200 billion, and that wasn't even arguably during a fully fledged type of altcoin season. So what could that do if, let's say, there was one, right? And again, this doesn't seem like that, I think, outlandish to me. Especially considering, again, we've seen like BNB back in 2021, even that year, reach over 100 billion in terms of market cap, and we saw that year as well Dogecoin reach around $80 billion in market cap. Like, this doesn't seem too outlandish, but again, only time will tell. However, when I take a look at the final price scenario, the idea of maybe $3, a 12x from here, market cap at that point, again, considering current circulating supply, would be around 127 billion. Now, when I take a look at the factors like the Bitcoin ETF, the Ethereum ETF, when I take a look at how supposedly there's more crypto owners right now than ever before in history at over 600 million, when I take a look at all those factors, if there is a fully fledged type of altcoin season, not only do I have this mindset that if it looked better than back in 2021, it wouldn't surprise me, but also if, let's say, H-bar at that point, let's say during a peak of like a fully fledged type of altcoin season during the cycle, reach the price of $3, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me either. But again, only time will tell. However, even besides that, people like to say, oh, what is the timeline and all this? Well, the only thing I can do is actually just wait. That's the way you take a look at it. Whenever H-bar does decide to have that next leg up, whenever altcoins does decide to wake up, it's going to be beyond my control. So the only thing I can do really, I think, is just stay patient And I think by just me preparing, it kind of makes it so that if, let's say, altcoins peak in November this year or December or even sometime next year, right? Let's say like in February or something like that. Whenever that timeline is, by just dollar cost averaging and holding, if let's say there is a moment like that, I don't have to necessarily find the exact moment, right? I could just be holding, and then let's say there is a moment, I prepared for that. This is the way to take a look at it. I'm just preparing for a moment as opposed to anticipating the perfect moment, because I don't think I'll ever find it. And again, what I did with HBAR before was just stay patient, hold, and had that pretty good rally. Now, granted, there was a pullback, but you know what? That's what I'm going to be doing in case there's that next leg up, and in case there is a fully fledged altcoin season. I just want to be holding and just waiting and staying patient. And that's pretty much about it.